I'm Samantha Simpson, and this is The Movement. And today I'm excited to chat with Antosia Fiedur, and she is going to share with us her knowledge and her understanding of herbalism and female wisdom. And we're going to talk about that and a bunch more other stuff today. Antosia, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Why don't you start by sharing with us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm a women's health herbalist, and so I help women with hormonal issues mostly. So I take a very hormone-centric approach to women's health in general. So things like digestive problems, skin health problems, autoimmune disease, they all have a huge hormonal component to them. So that's kind of how I approach women's health in general.
And how do you determine if somebody's got a hormonal imbalance? I mean, a lot of us say, oh my God, my hormones are crazy right now, or around the time of their cycle. Is that real?
Absolutely. I mean, any kind of female problems usually are hormonal or at least linked to hormones, but there's a whole list of symptoms. I could make a list of like 10 pages of symptoms that kind of tell us that we have hormonal imbalances. But for women, if you have PMS, that's a good sign that you have a hormonal imbalance. Irregular periods, if you have issues with your energy levels, that could be a hormonal imbalance. Any type of mood swings, acne, if you have a really hard time losing weight, those are really common problems that women have that are linked to hormones.
So are you telling us that if we experience PMS, then we have hormonal imbalances?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. PMS is a hormonal imbalance. So it's something that's called estrogen dominance. And that's where you tend to have more estrogen compared to your progesterone levels. And it's an unhealthy ratio between those two hormones that's most likely to cause those PMS symptoms. There's of course like a lot of other hormones that come into play with PMS, but estrogen dominance is kind of what it's centered on.
Interesting. And have you ever heard of people having mood swings, bloating, hormonal issues during other times of their cycle, perhaps during ovulation?
Yes. So that's something that not a lot of people know about, but you can have like PMS. It's not really PMS because it's not before your period, but you can have PMS type symptoms when you're ovulating. And sometimes it's a little bit more rare, but you can also have it after your period as well, where women tend to get like really depressed, like on their third to fifth day of their period. So that's another kind of PMS type problem.
And what do you recommend for women experiencing this? I mean, I know that some woman watching this is feeling like, oh my God, now I'm so scared. I have a hormonal imbalance. What do I do about it? And a lot of people are going to doctors even, and the doctors are checking their hormones and saying, you're fine.
Oh yeah.
What do you recommend to someone like that? Because we've been told PMS is normal, right?
Yeah, that's so common, like going to the doctor and either like for me, my doctor just wouldn't test my hormones because he's like, well, it's not going to show anything that's useful for us. Or some people will get their hormones tested with their doctor and the doctor's like, everything's fine. So, and then they just don't know, women just don't know what to do after that. But yeah, with PMS, it is like a total body approach. It's a very holistic approach. So there's a lot of things you can do for it. You definitely want to make sure that you have good energy levels. To be honest, after working with a lot of women who have hormonal imbalances, I find that a lot of us just aren't good at managing our energy. So we're maybe skipping breakfast or drinking coffee for breakfast, not getting enough sleep at night. That can really contribute to PMS. But there's a whole host of root causes of PMS and estrogen dominance. So, but that's my short answer is you want to kind of make sure that your energy is good, and then maybe work with someone to kind of identify the root cause of your PMS before you pick a specific solution to address it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so you recommend people working with a physician or working with you to find their specific cause of PMS?
Sure. I mean, it's really depends on kind of how you want to approach your health. But of course, I'm a women's health herbalist, so I think that approaching your health holistically and working with someone who can really identify your root cause of your PMS, just myself, to address it is the best approach for sure.
And what are some things that you would recommend once you find someone's root cause of PMS, for example?
Well, sure. So with PMS, it tends to be indigestion that is contributing to PMS. So sometimes if there's digestive problems, we got to make sure there's healthy bowel movements, because if you're not pooping once or twice per day, what happens is your body gets rid of estrogen through your bowel movements. And if it's too slow, your estrogen actually gets reabsorbed and you get higher estrogen levels. So indigestion and making sure you have regular bowel movements is really important. If we identify that maybe the liver is the root cause of the PMS, then it's more of a detoxification approach. I always call the liver the woman's health organ you don't know about, because it's so important for healthy menstrual cycles, because it helps to eliminate hormones, it helps to balance your blood sugar. All of that's really important for PMS. So perhaps detoxification is going to be the route that I take for my clients who have PMS. Perhaps energy levels. I have a lot of women who are very health conscious, but they don't necessarily eat enough calories throughout the day. So I see a lot of under eating or irregular eating that contributes to PMS. So perhaps more regular eating, or working on blood sugar imbalances. So blood sugar can contribute to irregular period. High levels of blood sugar can contribute to irregular periods, which can cause PCOS, which is a really common health condition that women have. Basically, they don't ovulate regularly. About 10% of all women have it. And so blood sugar is really important.
Again? 10%?
10% of all women have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And this is basically where you don't ovulate regularly. You have irregular cycles, you have longer cycles, and that can contribute to PMS as well. And so for most women who have PCOS, blood sugar is really important.
How does one know if they have PCOS? I've heard about this before. I know a lot of women are struggling to get pregnant because they have PCOS.
Yeah. So if you have a cycle that's shorter than 21 days or longer than 35 days, that means your cycles are irregular. And the most common reason for irregular cycles is PCOS. There are also other causes that are a little bit more rare, but PCOS is the most common reason why women have that problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what kind of results can people expect to find? Say you've got a woman coming to you and saying, oh my God, my cycles are so painful, I can't even work. Or I've just got so much pain that I can't even do anything for the day. When it's gotten that bad, how long can this woman expect to take before she starts feeling better?
That's a really good question. I mean, that's kind of where I was at with my periods. From the time that I got my periods at age 13. They were horrible. And I went through that for many years. But I'm at the point now where I don't have period problems. Like I don't have PMS. I don't have issues with my ovulation. So you can completely fix your period. You can get to the point where it's not a problem for you anymore. And how long does that take? Really depends on what state your health is in. So for example, I have autoimmune disease. So it took me a bit longer than probably the average woman. It took me, I would say, by the time I figured out what was working for me, I would say it took about a year to get my body back into balance. But a lot of my clients who I work with, they get better within a month to 3 months, with just making a few changes in their routine, maybe taking some herbs, some nutrients. So it really depends on your state of health, but it can be pretty quick.
Oh, that's awesome. So what is the age range of people that you work with? So people have periods from 13 to in their 50s. My mom, I think, had hers until she was 60.
Nice. I work with women of childbearing age. So my clients tend to be like 20 years old to 40 years old. So yeah, I would say that if you're someone who's going through like perimenopause or menopause, then you should work with like someone who specializes and just does menopause. That's not what I do. I just work with women who are still menstruating and are going to be menstruating for a while.
What inspired you to get into this field?
You know what? I struggled with horrible PMS. It was like ruining my life. I lost jobs because of it. And, I tried birth control medication. And I just felt like I didn't have a normal life because of my PMS. I felt like it actually affected my relationships too, like my romantic relationships, affected my friendships. And I was like, this cannot go on any longer. I know this doesn't have to be this way. I just got to figure it out. So I worked with like a lot of practitioners who helped me. I worked with an amazing herbalist who was like my hero in Peru. She was like this redheaded, super confident woman who's like, I'm gonna fix you, and she helped me. So she kind of inspired me to get into this because she was so different than anyone I had ever worked with. She was she was an herbalist. So I feel like herbalists are a little bit different in that they're it's a different kind of personality that attracts people to herbalism than say maybe naturopaths or doctors. She was just very feisty, and her attitude really inspired me, and how she made me feel safe, and she made me feel like she could take care of me. And I just wanted to provide other people with that as well.
And she helped you start feeling better, sounds like.
Absolutely. Like I worked with her, and within like a couple months, I felt like a different person. I remember the summer after working with her was like the best summer of my life. I felt like a normal person. Yeah.
That's amazing. I work with a lot of women and men who've experienced pelvic floor pain, issues with constipation and diarrhea. And my specialty is body work and body movement and body alignment. What effect would herbs have on, if any, on the health of the pelvic floor?
Pelvic floor. Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, any kind of inflammation in that area can be helped by herbal medicine. So, even women who have PMS is an inflammatory state, especially if you're experiencing cramps or endometriosis or anything like that. So I think anti-inflammatories can in general help that area, especially if it's affecting, like if you're having constipation or diarrhea during your menstrual cycle. So one herb that I really like is evening primrose oil. I don't know if you've ever used it before, but it's helps with prostaglandins and kind of contractions in that area. So if someone's experiencing a lot of inflammation, I'm sure that can really affect that pelvic floor area just with all that tension there. So using some kind of herbs like anti-inflammatories like evening primrose oil to help kind of calm that area and soothe that area can really help with excess contraction, whether it's cramps during your period or diarrhea or constipation.
Oh, awesome. And is that something that you take in a capsule form, or do you rub it on your belly?
Yeah, it's something that you can take in it usually comes in like a gel caplet. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Have you researched or run across any information about the link between the hormones and the elasticity of the fascia in the womb area? And I'm speaking of the ligaments that hold the womb in place. So some of the research I've come across suggests that different cycles of hormones create more elasticity in the ligaments that hold up the womb. And some people I know and have encountered and have spoken with have also noticed that their womb becomes heavier at different parts of their cycle. And some women actually experience prolapse to a greater degree during different times of their cycle. What I'm getting at here is there an herbal cure for this? So if our hormones are affecting the elasticity of the ligaments and the fascia in our womb space, will changing those hormones create more comfort and less prolapse?
It's interesting because I've seen progesterone improve this condition, but I've also read studies that say that progesterone actually contributes to that elasticity of that area, and even elasticity of the joints. So I'm curious what kind of studies you read about it and what you came across, because I find it really interesting, because a lot of pharmaceutical companies and scientific studies, I feel like, are biased against progesterone and for estrogen, because there's a lot of estrogen drugs that are being sold and they're highly profitable, but there's not really as many progesterone drugs being sold that are profitable. So when I read scientific studies talking about progesterone and estrogen, I'm usually very I'm always practicing skepticism about what comes up in those studies, because I don't find it's necessarily accurate compared to what women are actually experiencing in real life. So I'm curious as to what you've read about that.
It's, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff, and that leads me to a segue, something I've always been curious about. I just have to ask you. They told us don't eat soy, it's going to affect your estrogen, and I want to know the truth, because is that just some plan by big agriculture, I don't know, to get us to eat meat instead of soy products?
Well,
before they used to say don't eat soy, it'll mess with your periods.
So I was a vegetarian for 5 years. I ate a ton of soy, and I have to say my hormones had never been worse than when I was eating soy. So it definitely has an effect on your hormones, but I don't think people even really know what kind of effect it has on your hormones, because it's supposed to be, some people say it's estrogenic, which makes sense, because when I ate it, my periods were like 10 days long. So that seems to say that there was a lot of estrogen activity in my body. But then there's some people, like there's a naturopath, Dr. Lara Bryden. She's really great in the menstrual health world. She says that it actually blocks your estrogen and blocks you from ovulating, and that's why periods can be so long, because you actually have an anovulatory period. So I feel like we know that soy impacts our estrogen somehow, but no one really knows what it's doing exactly. So I usually say to stay away from soy, because it's like, why consume something that you don't even really know how it's impacting your hormones? You know what I mean?
There's so many variables, and there's so many plant foods that we take in that could be altering the chemistry of our hormones. It's hard to know what to do and what to eat.
I agree. I always say to stay away from soy and flaxseed. Like, some people like to use flaxseed and seed cycling, but it's the most estrogenic food that exists. So I say yes, soy, dairy, and flaxseed. They just impact our hormones. It's not necessarily something you want to consume unless you know what you're doing. Like, some people will use flaxseed as seed cycling thing to help regulate your cycles. Some people swear by it. So I'm not going to say stop eating flaxseed if you're seed cycling, but if you're consuming it, know why you're doing it and know what kind of result you want from it.
All right. When it comes to diet, is there a diet that we should follow according to our cycle that makes things easier for us? I've spoken with other women, and they say you should eat this at this quarter of the cycle, but eat this at this quarter of the cycle. Is there any truth to that?
I think there's like so many different methods. Like I know, like in Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, they have like very specific food recommendations. For me, I think that with ovulation, we know that when you're ovulating, it requires a lot of energy to ovulate. So I always say just eat well when you're ovulating. Do not skip meals to help your body do that, to pull off the ovulation. And then when it comes to luteal phase, I mean, this is a phase of your cycle where women tend to feel not very good, where you have PMS. So eating carbs regularly throughout the day can be really helpful. I came across one study that found that your body uses progesterone better when you eat carbs regularly throughout the day. So this doesn't mean you have to eat like, go eat a ton of cookies and cake, but you want to be eating like, maybe a sandwich to get a little bit of your carbs in. So carbs regularly throughout your luteal phase is really helpful.
And for those who are listening, what is the luteal phase?
Oh yes, luteal phase is after you ovulate up until the time of your period. So this is like when people tend to experience PMS and feel cranky, like 2 weeks before your period to a week before your period.
Okay, all right. Not everybody knows that. I just wanted to clarify that. I wanted to touch on so you talked about eating through the cycle. Would it be advisable to fast at any point during the cycle?
So it depends on who you ask. I'm not a pro faster. I do not really support fasting for women who have menstrual cycles. I find that a lot of the research that's done on fasting is actually done on men or women who are in menopause. And the reason they do that is because our hormones, when we're menstruating, mess with the results and make the results really inconsistent for fasting research if we're included in the research. So they don't include us menstruating women. And so that's kind of telling for me. It's like, well, if you're not including us in the research, that's probably because it's affecting our bodies in ways that are creating different results. So what does that mean exactly? Why is it affecting our bodies differently? So this research that I found on progesterone, where it said, the research found that you need regular carb intake to have good for your body to be able to use your progesterone, that tells me that, hey, I think women who are menstruating should be eating regularly. What our bodies are doing is like really demanding. And I find that fasting, I hear from a lot of women who like fasting that they like it because it makes them feel energized. And they say that they feel really good from fasting. And I don't know if you enjoy fasting yourself, if you're one of those people. But I find that sometimes we feel energized from fasting because our body doesn't have any carbs or fats to fuel us. And so our bodies start to raise our stress hormones in order to get us through the day. And that can be very energizing at first. So yeah, I'm
about that. I have experimented with fasting, and I think that I'm healing my gut right now. And when I do fast, I don't have to worry about the inflammatory response after eating, and it does feel good not to have that all day. So I think that's another thing that could be coming to view that wasn't seen before.
Totally, I totally get that. I mean, I struggled with digestive problems for a really long time, so I would just kind of avoid eating sometimes, and I get that feeling where you just like feel good to not eat. And there are diets, like for example, for people who really struggle with gas and bloating, there's like an elemental diet where you basically just drink this kind of mixture of vitamins and minerals, and it helps to kind of treat the gas and bloating. And some people feel really good after doing that type of diet. So I totally understand kind of the feeling behind that. But I think like as a long-term strategy, maybe not the best.
Yeah. What is the most important wisdom you could give for menstruating women?
I think that it's really important to get down into your body and get embodied and start to listen to the feedback that your body is giving you. That's something that I work with a lot with my clients, because sometimes my clients will tell me, they're like, I don't even know how I feel. Like, I don't know if I feel better. I don't know if I feel worse. A lot of women are kind of disembodied because we spend a lot of time in our heads thinking and working, and not a lot of time feeling in our bodies. So I think that our bodies are constantly giving us feedback as to how we feel. And it's kind of our jobs to learn to read that feedback and learn what it means and respond accordingly. So I do a lot of work educating my clients and my audience about symptoms. Like, how do you read symptoms? How do you read your own body? Because if you start to hear what your body is telling you, you kind of make adjustments. And sometimes it's something really small, like, for example, sometimes I don't sleep very well at nighttime, and sometimes I ignore it because I don't care. Do you know what I mean? And my body's giving me that feedback of saying, hey, you're stressed out. You need to calm down. You're not sleeping well. And so I have to remind myself to pay attention to those types of symptoms because those things add up and they affect our menstrual cycle. So yeah, but I would say body reading and just learning to listen to what your body is telling you, because most of the time we know when our body's not happy. We just kind of need to listen to it and make adjustments.
Awesome. Well, if somebody watching or listening wants to work with you, how can they reach you? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I have a website. It's herbodywisdom.com. There's like tons of great articles on there if you want to check some, do some reading, see what I'm all about. But yeah, herbodywisdom.com. You can reach out to me there.